call the February 21, 2019 Budget Committee meeting to order, 7 p.m. sharp. And we can do the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge the allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sherry, would you like to take the roll call?
Jeff Karen,
He's absent.
Jay Edwards,
Here.
Tom Haley,
Here.
Ruth Hombach,
Present.
Deborah Janik,
Present.
Jennifer Jocelyn,
Present.
Justin LaCroix,
Present.
Brendan McNally,
Present.
Jennifer Rashley, Joseph Souza.
Present.
Thank you. We'd like to open the floor for any public comment that anyone would like to make on tonight's agenda items. No one at the moment? Okay. Okay, I'll close that at the moment then, and move on to number 5, which is town hall, discussion of and preliminary vote on town hall operating expenses budget. Is Jan going to be here to do that?
Oh, we were gonna approve the minutes first, just,
We can, but that's not the order here. I mean, we can change
right.
it.
well, I thought we said that at the last meeting, that would be first thing on this docket, because we were already behind.
Okay,
So I'll
so
make a motion to move that forward in the agenda. Approval of the minutes.
do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we're moving on to 8, which is approval of minutes from February 7, 2009. Oh, everybody vote on that motion?
No.
Unanimous. So moving on to number 8, item number 8, approval of minutes from February 7, 2019.
I'll move to approve the February 7th minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Everybody in favor? Item number 9, I could entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February 9th, 2019?
I'll move.
Do we have,
Second.
sure. Okay. Everybody vote, anyone could vote on this one?
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't present.
Okay. Justin
Item number 10, approval of minutes from February 14th, 2019.
I'll move to accept the February 14th minutes.
Second.
And all those in favor?
I'll abstain from that as well because I was not present.
Thank you, Justin.
All over.
Item 11, approval of minutes from February 16th, 2019. Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
And all those in favor?
I'll abstain from that because I was not present.
Abstain.
Jay's abstaining, right? Okay.
Okay. No, Jay Edwards.
Jay, Edwards.
And that was the, which one was that?
16.
16.
Let me see. I'll see if
Okay.
Who made that motion? Son. Brendan again?
All, yeah.
And who seconded it this time?
So while he's doing that, just mentioning to, and I know everyone already knows this, but we're going to try to be, succinct and as brief as possible, but get your point across, yes, but just try to put it in a concise manner. That's-
Yeah, it's going to be read out.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. Just waiting a few minutes.
Seconded that 16th.
I did.
Oh, Joe did it.
Hello, Jan.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Now we got that out of the way, just clear sailing. All right, here's some paperwork here.
Thank you for presenting the town hall operating expenses budget, Jan. That's great. And it's item number 5 on our agenda. So whenever you're ready is fine.
The only thing I noticed is I don't have a pen with me.
Oh, you want to borrow mine? Okay.
Item 5. Okay. Actually, actually thought that we talked about town hall operations earlier.
We had, I don't know if we were operating it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We did actually cover, I mean, Nancy had come up and talked about some of it. I'm not sure if we didn't finish the thing. Does anybody remember?
I don't think we did the heat, the electric, the actual operations.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we did that. I think Nancy did the different departments.
Maybe it was wishful thinking on my part.
Page 3 of the docket has the expenses like heat, electric, water
Yep.
supplies, okay.
I may be able to answer questions.
Okay, just looking at what changed, so we have a lower cost for heat. And pretty even on electric. It has gone down from past years, but pretty even. Even, even on water and supplies. Telephone even. Building maintenance, even, and Essex Building Utilities. Okay, Essex, can you comment on that one?
Which one?
Essex Building Utilities?
Yeah, you
Not-
must be in a different version.
Oh, okay, I have a different version, all right.
That sounds like 2018.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right, that's
They
it.
sold that building.
All right, I got the wrong doc, it's okay. Yeah, page
Is that page 2?
2, yeah, sorry.
Section 1040.
I was looking at that for just past reference, but. Page 2, okay, so yeah, did everything except the Essex, right? So, Jan, water and supplies went up 14%. Can you speak to that one, maybe?
It's 14%, which sounds like a lot, except for when you looked at it, it's a change from 700 to 800. I think it's just, if I'm not mistaken, based on, where we currently are in the current fiscal year, in terms of how we're spending and what it tends to be going up lately, so.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go around. Does anyone have any comments? If you do, we don't have comments, we can,
Just one.
go ahead, yeah.
All the other
Jay.
departments had an increase for heat and you don't.
We generate heat.
Right, because you're working,
Everybody comes in hot under the collar and generates heat.
because you're working so hard, yeah, that's good. Okay.
So how can you convince the other departments to reduce theirs?
Yeah, right.
I know. Actually, my personal experience is that I needed auxiliary heat when we had the really cold weather. It's not funny. It's actually very cold in there. But again, I'm not the one who is on this all the time. I think Nancy looked at it, the treasurer looked at it, and I think the budget is adequate for the heat
I'm just
demand
curious.
that we have here. Yeah.
Okay,
And it may
thank-
also have something to do with what we use for heat in this building compared to some of the other buildings.
Okay, thank you very much. If no one else has comments, we can move on to item 6.
Can I just mention
Oh,
one
sure.
other thing? And this, I believe we did, but just a reminder that in the capital budget, there are town hall repairs and renovations.
We can take a look at that.
And I think you will have more opportunity to make up your own mind about that and discuss it when you do the site visit, which I think is gonna be this
This weekend.
Right, this is Saturday.
And one of the things I wanted to, I just thought about this the other day, that when I came up with the estimate of 10,000 together with Nancy, the 10,000 is almost like, nothing extraordinary in terms of repairs or minor renovations. But then I reminded myself that what we have downstairs is something that you can hardly characterize as an adequate storage space for records. And I encourage you to take a good look at that this weekend, because it's somewhat appalling and not a good way to keep paper records. And I think there are ways that we can use that space more efficiently, but it will take some renovation to do it right, and then, instead of having to find another facility. Although we do have a new storage facility coming in the industrial park.
Are you saying there's going to be not enough space soon, or is it the way it's stored?
It's very full, but it's also not, I mean, it's boxes stacked on top of one another instead of on the, shelves or things like that. So I think it can be done more efficiently. I think the whole records management thing is something that is always a challenge at the municipal level, and, we need to do something. We also need to move towards electronic records more, instead of just keep generating more paper that we don't have the room for, so.
Yeah, I agree with that. The shelves can be put in fairly
Mhm.
easily, but we'll all discuss it after the site visit, it looks like, okay.
And we'll bring our sweaters, so you don't.
Yeah, we'll wear our coats. Do not put the heat on, especially for us. Okay, if there's no other comments on that, we can move on to
So are we talking about the capital?
I think after the site visit, we sort of said, maybe
Okay.
after the site visit. Being a little more informed on why and how. Is that okay?
Sure,
Okay,
yeah,
agree.
absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. So item number 6 is discussion of and preliminary vote on town administrator budget. That's page 3 on the docket.
So, there, I guess the photocopier lease was never included in the last several years, but we do have to pay for it. We may also have to replace it. It's beginning to hesitate more and more. But if we replace it, it may well be on a lease basis. And just so that you know, we're looking at that whole approach as well. Because over the years, I think in part due to budgets that were not really adequate to do this on a town-wide or town government-wide basis, individual departments started buying things like on sale at Staples or this or that. And so now we have a mix of some copiers and printers that are being maintained professionally versus others that we got supposedly at a good deal that we don't have service arrangements for. And it leads to a somewhat difficult situation to try and manage reliability and things like that. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at these days, what do you really need from a copier and printer? Do we really need fax functions, things like that? And what can we do to shift more to the computer equipment that we have? But we're smack in the middle of that, and then trying to find out, these days, what is the best arrangement you can have with vendors. That's a lot,
Okay.
it's actually less of an issue in my particular budget right now, but for some of the other departments, it's a bigger issue. And we're trying to bundle it more to
Okay.
deal with it on a town hall
Share it,
wide.
that's great, yeah, great. Did you want to speak to that? Any other items? Let's do all the items
Just
first. and then we'll-
before we go on past the copier, we had made a request for a price. If we remember, when we talked to Nancy,
Yes,
we requested a price on a new copier. So I haven't seen that yet, but hopefully that'll come forward if it's truly a request.
right, and we mentioned getting a brand that doesn't, require lots of repairs, just to be careful when they purchase it, that's all.
So, just so I understand it, so you want the type and value or price for a copier?
For a new, one in that, the main copier, yeah. She was gonna get us a price for a new one,
Oh, for buying a new one?
yeah.
Okay, I'll make sure you get that.
Thank you.
Can you compare it to the lease too? Because sometimes with the leases, they come with not only service contract, but also a supplies contract, where you're not purchasing toner, you get so much per month per your contract, that's
Right.
all bundled. So sometimes leasing, that might be the one time that leasing might benefit, because if you're not purchasing the toner and servicing.
And just so that you know, just last week I had a meeting with someone who has been servicing a lot of our equipment and replacing it from time to time, who was a little disturbed to find that some of his equipment had been replaced with other ones. But we're trying to figure out, and he has come up with an estimate of, where replacements will be needed and what that might cost and what today the most efficient models are, depending on, like, this is the highest, demand machine in that office, obviously, by far. And so that needs to be probably the more sophisticated, or at least the most robust
Okay,
piece that we can get.
thanks, Jennifer. Any other items here that you'd like to speak to, Jan? A lot of it is the zero level funded. I don't know that we need to go through those. They're probably fine from last year.
So the one that went up also significantly is the IT consulting services.
Is that on the next
And that is a reflection of my effort
Page
to
4.
coordinate it more, instead of having either actual accounts in separate departments for computer services, or sometimes it's hidden in some other account, like supplies, is to try and make it more explicit, both on the capital side in terms of equipment that we need and what's the cycle to replace it, things like that. But then you also need the consulting services in terms of, from time to time, we need to upgrade, we need expert recommendations and guidance on, where we should go with new equipment when it's needed. But it's also the troubleshooting, to have that kind of a service, and to do that more on a combined basis rather than doing it department by department, which can be a little bit inefficient.
Oh, right, but it went up 198%. Is that, okay, that's a lot. I don't really
It is a
totally
lot.
understand.
And it would go up from what was approved last year, 8,400, to 25,000.
1,000?
And that also reflects, if you go to the capital budget, there is that new category for IT, that we are hoping to, and I think I explained this when we talked about the capital budget, I'm hoping to do again what we just did for fire and department, which is replacing outdated equipment that was no longer performing reliably, and that was the priority there, because we're talking public safety, and using today's technology such as cloud-based computing, and having less equipment here that can break here or that we need to pay for repairs. And that is more outside, and someone else has the responsibility for that, so that we have fewer costs in the long run. Cloud-based also just results in, generally, you need less equipment that you have to buy all the time. But you still need, in particular in this coming year, the extra consulting help to figure out, how we configure this system. And
The new
that turned
system.
out to be more expensive than we thought for police and fire. We managed to find a way to cover it, but it isn't cheap.
Because of the new system is why it went up. The new-
Correct.
Okay.
And the one other thing I need to mention there is that this was before my time, but I believe at one point we got a really big grant, and at that time replaced an awful lot of computers. Unfortunately, they're all becoming old at the same time. So we're also trying to come up with a system that maybe we can stagger that a little bit more.
And look for another grant too, maybe? I don't know if that would, another grant perhaps?
We always, yeah.
You looking for them? I know.
I'm
Okay,
looking
thank
for the grant writer, actually.
you. We thought you were the grant writer. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
this is just all about centralizing IT in one place instead of having it farmed out all over the place and getting a better handle on it, maybe getting a better deal.
As long as you have, it's a little, it's a trade-off, because you need to have someone who actually capable of running that or overseeing it. And if you don't have that, maybe the decentralized approach is better, I don't know. But I tend to think that we can achieve better cost effectiveness when we centralize it.
Jennifer?
So the idea is the upfront cost this year would go, or for this coming year would go up, but then it would consolidate costs and lower them for the following years.
Yeah, and this one, I think we need to just reevaluate it when we're there later on in the next fiscal year. This may also include the subscription services that increasingly you need to These days, you can't really just buy the software anymore. You have to subscribe to it, and it upgrades automatically every year. But it tends to be it tends to be more expensive. But it comes with, I mean, there are really no alternatives anymore to that. So some of the software, that's the only way you get it, and you need to have the money to, pay for the subscriptions.
And just on the comments, just make, if anything can be held till the end, we're going to go around the circle. But if you had a specific thing for the item and you want to say it now, that's fine.
I do have a quick,
Okay, Deb?
I know I keep hopping on the police and fire, but is it the same consulting company?
Yes, it is.
So that they have an idea of,
That was the other thing, that we had a separate consultant, and there were some serious issues with that
Yeah.
consultant in the end. And the consultant who worked for us here in Town Hall and DPW was a different one. And now it's the same, so that we can make sure that there's compatibility, across the board. And I think it's also much more transparent.
Okay, if we could just go down through the items. Jan, if you see anything that stands out, we went photocopier, because it's 100%, we talked about that. Anything that's gone up, IT we talked about. If you see anything else you'd like to let us know. League of Cities
Yeah,
and
you
Towns.
might notice that my expense account is going down.
Can you explain that, please?
It was a gesture.
It's nice of you. Okay. The League of Cities and Towns, Newport Chamber, is that something you think is worth?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And the first one mentioned is the League of Cities and Towns, and people may have different ideas about that, but in my opinion, there is a ton of value in membership. They do an awful lot of work on behalf of cities and towns, very effective in tracking legislation, for example, and then sending us regular updates as to what's happening, flagging issues that affect municipalities that we might want to weigh in on, and then representing us. Not that we always have the same opinions, but to have a professional organization on it all the time is very important. They also do white papers on key issues. They deal with special issues such as the whole motor vehicle tax issue that we've had, the phase out, and then the non-phase out, and then the partial phase out, and really helped us navigate that kind of stuff. They're really very, very, I think, worthwhile being a member of. And then the chamber, similarly, apart from everything else, it's a good networking thing so that we coordinate with people in the region, the surrounding communities, and when there are things that perhaps we ought to be doing on a regional basis in terms of promoting economic development. It's a good thing to be a member of it. Unfortunately, I don't find enough time to be as active as I wish we could be, but we certainly benefit from being members.
And what is that exactly called? Is it Newport Chamber? What?
It's the Newport County Chamber of Commerce, and it actually has a very wide reach where it even covers like Warren, for example. And apart from dealing with issues that are of interest to businesses, from small to large businesses, it also deals with things like tourism. It's on the issue of like the meals tax and the tourism tax and all of those things. So it looks at a whole range of issues. And again, when there's a need to combine forces, whether it's in the legislature or otherwise, you have that organization that can do that for you.
Okay, thank you. And if anyone wants him to speak on any item other than these, just please raise your hand if there's any other items. I was
No.
wondering about the Regional Economic Development Initiative. It says new, and then there's 0%. But go ahead. What did you want, Joe?
Only that, I think the reason why the League of Cities and Towns, a lot of people got a sour taste is when they put the toll on the Sakonnet River Bridge. They wouldn't take a stand. Same with the Chamber of Commerce. So that was the reason why a lot of us said, you're no help to us. And quite frankly, I've looked at what they do for us, and the way I see it, the Newport Chamber of Commerce should be business owners, not the town paying out of its pocket. The local business owners should contribute to that. That's to help businesses in town Therefore, the local businesses should support it, not the taxpayers in whole. You know, we look at ways to put more money into our roads and things like this. And these were the type of things we said, you know, it might be great, but we have priorities. And we set our priorities, and they're more into fixing our infrastructure and not supporting a lobbyist at the State House. Just my personal opinion.
Thank you, Joe.
Can I say something, please?
Jay?
Jan can correct me if I deviate from the truth here. I believe you'll find that this particular organization had a lot to do with helping us with getting our street lighting program and PRISM.
Yeah.
So
And
if
as
you're
well
looking
as
for monetary value, I think, that'd be a place you could look.
And it also has this aggregated energy purchasing program, which is related to that, which has allowed municipalities to be part of a larger pool so that you can get better prices for energy purchase. They just changed from one provider to another because they figured that after a couple of years, there might be better deals out there, so they just entered into a new deal. And that's definitely of benefit to us. On the chamber, I would just want to add that I do believe that most chambers have memberships that are businesses. I know that's the case for the East Bay Chamber. I would be very surprised if Newport County is not the same way. And I doubt that the municipalities are the major source of revenue for the chambers.
Went up 4.32%, the budget. Is that just because they raised their dues? Is that the one?
They do raise it, and it's solely, based on that, not on new memberships or anything like that.
Yeah, I think we can, if anyone has any other items that they want to go through, or hear him speak on, or we're going to go around in a circle and do the questions when we're ready. Did you have an item you want him to speak on?
I just want to know what the townwide internet service is on this.
He'd like you to speak on the townwide internet service.
That's exactly what it says. Basically, what the internet services we get from, I forget which one it is right now, maybe Cox or whatever.
For town employees.
We get one bill, and
Yeah.
we pay that, and we pay the hosting fee and things like that for the website.
Oh, okay. Yeah, all right.
Okay. Does anyone have another item that you'd want to hear about before we go around the table?
I had a question,
Joe?
because I guess we're doing it, it used to be that each department had their own budget for maintenance. Now I'm noticing that you're pulling it all into capital. Under town hall building maintenance, I'm just reading, as of January 31st, there was a balance of $4,700 there. And I was just wondering, this is the money we used to put in the budget for painting walls and things like that. So there's still $4,000 some in there. What's that gonna get used for this year? I mean, can't some of this stuff get done this year, half of it?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, I'm just looking, this is
You have a
the
maintenance
expense budget
division.
and actual that we were passed.
Yep.
I mean, it was dated 12/31,
Mm-hmm.
and it showed a balance in that account.
Which is the maintenance account?
It says building maintenance.
Yeah, that's which is now part of DPW. It used to be a little bit more independent. It's Phil and
All right,
Manny.
well, those are the guys who do the painting and stuff, but usually the money was used for the materials and things like that, and you were talking about shelving. My suggestion was maybe look at this money to get some of the shelving done down there, because I know what it is. I mean, it's in the old basement, and the boxes are on the floor, stacked up. It's been like that for years. I think you got pallets, probably put pallets or something down there. So if there's money available already, that's all I'm saying.
I don't think that's enough money to do renovations of that.
I didn't say renovations, I said buy shelves and get the stuff off the floor.
I'm not gonna argue with you, I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just saying,
Right, okay.
you were asking for another, amount next year.
Right.
And there's money available this year.
Okay.
And before it gets swooped up or transferred into some other area, maybe use it.
Thank you, Joe. It was just, I guess it's just a suggestion on the shelving, which was a sort of a stopgap
Believe
until
me,
we actually
we
get.
do whatever we can to be as cheap as possible. We don't really have a choice. Every day, we try to come up with, how can it
Yeah.
that we do something within the budget. It's not as if we have extra money,
No.
you know, that we're
I
wasting
think
on
most
things.
most people just are feeling that shelving is pretty basic and we can get that done pretty quickly, but that's maintenance. Let's stick now to, yeah, town administrator budget. Let's go around the circle. Jennifer, Jocelyn, you have anything? Deb? Deb? Brendan?
Yeah, could you go, Jan, if you would, please? So looking at the IT, the consulting services,
Yeah.
is, that's for a contract to have someone help us figure out how to do a new world.
Right.
Okay.
We, such as what we had our current vendor do for police and fire. And he also has been, you know, providing the services in town hall and DPW, whatever, which a lot of it has been troubleshooting. So we're looking at ways of, instead of having the top of the line person do, you know, even the simple troubleshooting, can we have a different arrangement? Should we have someone on the inside who knows how to do the basic troubleshooting? Someone like a Dave Robert who is very in tune with it. We're looking at that, but especially when you're trying to figure out how to shift from the current system that we have to like a cloud-based system and figure out what is the most efficient and cost-efficient way to design that, you definitely need that kind of expertise to configure it, essentially.
So is it fair to say it's a mix of ongoing sort of troubleshooting? There's connections to printers, there's some issues that would be an annual contract that we would need. There's some software licenses that you talked about. And then a third category is sort of the overall planning. And what I'm wondering, so it's a big jump from 8,400 to 25,000, saying a lot of it's helping by we're consolidating, that you're not going to find this money in the different departments. But is it also something is looking at next year, so if some portion of the 25,000 is to have us plan things out, figure out where we are, next year we'll have consulting services to help us with day-to-day issues, and we'll have software licenses, but we won't necessarily have a planning component.
Not necessarily, right.
Okay. And is any of that, so looking at the capital budget, we have $40,000 as the request for new equipment. Is that, are they closely tied to any of the planning items that are in here, or kind of two separate?
Some of it. What I tried to do with that, I worked with the vendor as well, with Dave Roberts. You know, what is this gonna entail, and what are the different components, and how much of that is it gonna cost? And then when you bundle it, it becomes appropriate to make it a capital item, because it basically becomes a capital project. And then we all hope that when it's done and it's done right, it becomes more of a regular course of business and a lower cost proposition. So that was the approach. Even so, when we're taking what each department needs, and you try to consolidate it in one account, it does just make that a bigger account.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that you won't see any of it, because I think you've already noticed when you reviewed some of the department budgets that there are some departments that have very department-specific software that they need or systems that they need. And so that's still in their budget. But the overall program, like the Microsoft Office or whatever, that suite of programs, it's better that we do it as one rather than separately.
Right. And if the approval for the capital budget came forth and said, okay, there's new equipment coming in, we have new software and all, would migration of data and all that stuff be included in?
Absolutely.
Is it in part in the
Yeah.
25,000, or is it in the capital expense?
We hope that it's in the capital expense, most of that. Part of that is in flux because they've been looking at what will be the equipment, and it changes. So, for example, we would need fewer servers than was originally expected, but we still budgeted for, 3 servers. Then they did the upgrade and the shift over at police and fire, and they were able to get 3 servers there that could still be perfectly okay for town hall operations rather than the higher demand functions at police and fire. So then the estimate goes down again. But then there is another wrinkle that says, okay, but you really need to be tying into this statewide system, and that increases the cost again. So it's a bit of a fluctuating situation.
Yeah, well, part of it, what I'm wondering is how closely linked these are. So if someone says, hey, boy, budget's tight, and you get hit out of the IT consulting, and a lot of that work that's being done is anticipating new equipment and migration, then, and we approve the capital item, then you kind of go, boy, we don't have the expertise to help us do it. On the other side is to say, you know what, this isn't the year that we can afford the capital expense, and then say, well, guess what, we don't need to have as much in terms of the planning. I mean, I know in a perfect world, it would be, what you're looking for right now is both.
Yeah.
And what I want to do is just make sure we understand, so if there's some decoupling, or one budget gets cut and the other doesn't, it might impact what options there are to go forward.
I don't know that you can decouple it completely. It's not as if it's 25,000 just for, routine troubleshooting.
Okay,
That would be a high bill for that kind of activity. It's more than that,
okay.
yeah.
Thanks, Brendan. Sherry?
So the only question that I had about that was, I saw that there was the website, kind of the same thing, the website support stipend. Is that still going to be Dave Roberts' side of that?
Yeah.
Okay. So separate from the IT.
And that's really to make sure, what he does is, whenever we need to post something, we send it to him. He makes sure that it gets up on the website appropriately, and then that it works. He updates things from time to time, sometimes a little on the late side when we don't remind him that, we have new members of boards and commissions or whatever, but he does all of that.
And have you guys gotten any kind of estimates that break down those? I know you said you're still looking at the consulting firms and things like that, but have you guys gotten any kind of estimates for combining? I know fire's looking at their IT. I mean, do you guys have an idea of what it's going to be to something that we could see to give us some sort of idea? Because I think the same thing. If 25,000 is what's going to be asked for every year going forward, if there's something specific that needs to be paid for, maybe we could take something that's non-recurring capital and say, okay, this needs to get done. And maybe that could be something that happens sooner.
You're not gonna see those capital costs recurring every year.
Every year.
To be honest, I think you're gonna see the 25,000 every year.
Okay.
And that's a lower estimate than what some of the people who've been working on this would suggest. I've seen estimates of as much as, 45,000 on an annual basis, just because of the way computer technology for organizations like this, currently works with the subscriptions and the this and the that. And I've wanted to put the brakes on it a little bit and say, well, let's see what happens when, there's this new approach that supposedly is less equipment intensive and therefore less maintenance intensive, what it results in terms of troubleshooting and repairs and all this and that. So it's a little bit knowing what needs to happen. I have no doubt that it's the right way to go to cloud-based computing. It's appropriate to consolidate more of this so that we can get better economies of scale when we purchase things. But exactly what it will take to maintain this and exactly what the cost is going to be of the various subscriptions, I think, to some extent, we need to, we have quotes for, what it
That's
currently
kind of what I
costs
was asking.
to get like the Microsoft, subscriptions or the other subscriptions that we need. We're looking at things like the GIS systems that, both the tax assessor and the planning office needs. So certainly that has gone into these calculations.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Thanks, Sherry. So I was thinking the 25,000 would not be every year. So you're saying that is, and it's sad in a way because we're trying to save money by going more paperless but yet it's costing a lot. So it's just an issue to think over when you're budgeting, but I'm not sure how the
I would
total
encourage you
washout
to
is.
maybe read up on, these days, when you look at how government works and how we're actually trying to do more with less, both in terms of paper and in terms of, believe it or not, people, or that you can do more, be more productive if you use the right kind of computer equipment. You can save, but at the same time, it's not gonna get cheaper. It's not a cheap technology.
It's environmentally better, but.
It is.
I'm not sure
But
about
not only environmentally, in terms of productivity,
Yes.
it can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I just want to say that, this makes sense, that you have somebody that you can call when things aren't working, right? This is that entity, right? And that happens a lot. You can't get your stuff to work, and they have to take over your computer and troubleshoot for a little while. That's a,
But it is always, we always look at the choice of, would it make sense? And you're not gonna like this, but would it make sense to create an IT position in
right.
town? And, right now, we're not there.
No.
We think that it's actually, it works for us to have, and he's a really good consultant and very
Yeah.
responsive, so we're
Yeah, that-
doing well with our current arrangement.
That makes me like 25K a lot versus hiring somebody to do that full-time. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Jay?
All set.
Justin?
Jan, I can appreciate your efforts to consolidate and streamline in the budget, so thank you.
Thank you.
Joe? Any other questions?
Wanted to point out that in the budget docket we received, under Town Hall, under building maintenance, there's a request for $9,000. And then in the capital improvements, under Town Hall, there's a request for $10,000. So I guess a total of $19,000. It's just not understanding why they're in two different areas, but that was all.
Did you want to respond to that and explain the two?
It's my understanding, and just so that you know, even though I submit this budget request and I answer or try to answer the questions, it's not as if I, have come up with all these numbers. So we have a maintenance division, we have the guys who on a daily basis maintain this facility and several other facilities in town and run into certain expenses and keep track of certain expenses. And this is their estimate of, what is going to be needed in terms of materials to do the regular maintenance. The capital budget in this case for Town Hall is more, if we have projects, which we think we're gonna have, whether it's, making sure that we have the right kind of storage, proper record storage facility. We have real issues with the planning and building department and, the amount of space there and that we're bursting out of it. And, can we reconfigure it? That is gonna take, some extra, it's a project. It's more than just regular maintenance.
Thank you very much. I believe that wraps up this presentation. Thank you so much, Jan, for
Thank you very much.
doing that.
Thanks, John.
And we appreciate your efforts on
I
streamlining.
appreciate yours.
Thank you. Okay, I believe we can move on now to item number 7, discussion of and preliminary vote on school department budget. So anyone who would like to come forward to the table for that presentation, please come forward. Dr. Santioni and,
Yeah, I don't know whether 8 o'clock was the invitation time.
Do we need to wait?
do you, okay, we have to wait for Dr. Larkin. Okay.
So,
Okay, so then we'll recess until 8 o'clock. Do we have a motion for recess?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay.
Call the school committee into order. We are now in open session. So we're here to present to the budget committee. I'd like to introduce Dr. Peter Sanchioni, our superintendent of schools, who will make a presentation to you guys if you're ready.
Thank you very much, Dr. Larkin.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I just wanted to mention before you started, to make sure you use the microphones because they are sort of directional, straight to you. And any more introductions? Could we also
yeah.
have
Sure.
mentioned?
To my left is Diane Farnworth, and in the audience is the inimitable Mrs. Black, and Ms. Palish, and is Wayne here? There you are. And Ms. Pavo,
Okay, thank you.
Tiverton School Committee.
And I would like to go around the budget committee just to name our names for them. Jennifer?
Deb Janik.
Jennifer Rashley?
Brendan McNally?
Sherry Ockery.
Ruth Hollenbach?
Tom Haley.
Jay Edwards.
Justin LaCroix?
Thank you very much. And then also, before you start, we just wanted you to know that we've heard all the very interesting new initiatives, and we are excited about those that we've heard that Dr. Sancioni and the school committee have in mind. So with that, take it away, Dr. Sancioni.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Budget Committee, it's a pleasure to be in front of you this evening. The title of this presentation is I'll look at our FY20 budget request, but I need to impress upon you that this is an educational plan. And as we go about creating this budget, when I say we, all the administrators in the district and our staff who had huge input in giving this presentation, putting this presentation for you today, we think about educating 1,800 students to high levels every day. So with that being said, and understanding that's what this plan is out to achieve, when we started putting this together, just review with you some goals that sort of gives you the context for the numbers you're about to see. We certainly have, like any budget that you've probably looked at many, this mandated and fixed costs. So you're going to start there as you start to formulate your cost. In our industry, certainly people make the difference. People are the most important part of our organization. So we want to maintain every staff position we currently have, but more importantly, we want to add some select positions that we feel will improve student achievement. We want to meet all our mandated costs associated with special education, which again is a fixed and mandated cost. We've calculated increases in energy, maintenance, and transportation. We have contracts for our buses. We know what our electricity, our oil bills are, things of that nature. We want to increase to a small extent our ability for technology and curriculum. And again, it's all about the 1,800 students we serve on a daily basis. This is truly an investment in their future. So some historical data, some numbers for you to look at, and I know you have this as a PowerPoint in front of you, and certainly I know we provided you with a detailed budget book this evening, which I'll go through with you at some point. Our enrollment certainly gives us some input on the staffing needs that we have, and you can see that there's been a dip, but you also see that it starts to stabilize. So, currently this year we're educating 1,746 students, and next year we expect a small increase. Looking out even further, we're seeing it then starting to trend to go up a little bit, and certainly that's depending upon the growth that Tiverton has been, and it looks like it's going to continue to experience. Some per pupil expenditure cost here. This is for FY17, which is the most recent data that is out there. FY18 numbers were just submitted, so we expect to see those soon, but just as a comparison type data here. You can see some surrounding communities, what the state average is, what Tiverton's certainly suggests that Tiverton is investing in their school system. I wouldn't say by any means that there's an overspend here, but I wouldn't say there's an underspend either. So with a little background, we'll talk about some numbers. The budget that I'm presenting to you is based on the needs of the Tiverton Public Schools. So it's an increase of 7.3%. And you can see the numbers here. If I speak in round numbers, we're currently working on a $30.2 million budget. We're looking to increase it by $2.2 million to move it up to $32.4 million. And that's interesting that you're not seeing that. It works on a Mac. These PCs just don't do it. I know you have the charts in front of you, so if you want to look there, I can certainly talk you through it. I apologize that it's not transcribing up onto the screen. But what you're looking at, if that $32.4 million was actualized, how would it be spent? And that's critical for everyone to understand. Well, the two biggest part of that chart there, which ends up being 80%, is staff. That's the salaries and benefits for all of our staff. That tells you that this budget is predicated on the needs of the students in the system. There's not a lot of frill in this budget. The next biggest category are other purchase services, which is our special ed tuitions, which comes in around 10%. So now we're up to 90% of the budget. Then the next highest category is purchase professional services. That in essence is where we put our energy. And these code names, these are codes that we have to fill out for accounting purposes through RIDE. So now you're up to about 94% of the budget. And then there's small categories left. But if I call your attention to the two biggest parts of the pie there, that 80%, I'm gonna break that down in the next pie chart. And again, you don't see the categories here. I apologize, it's not transcribing, but this is just the personnel. This is almost $19 million of the budget. And this thing here, again, it's taking the 80% and dividing that out. And again, teachers come in at 63%. The next highest category is administrative assistants at 5%, custodians at 4.7%, paraprofessionals, were second at almost 20%, and then administration at 3.6%. So again, you're seeing that the money invested in this budget is going directly to support the children in our schools. So your budget book and the rest of this presentation, it's divided into two main categories. 80% of the budget is staffing, is salary, and so that's what I'm showing you on this slide here. I've broken that out. When you look at your budget book there, you're gonna see a tab that says salaries, and that corresponds to the numbers that you're seeing here. So if we start at where the current budget resides, and again, I'll use round numbers at $17.2 million, the things we need to add to salaries: cost of steps, cost of lanes, COLA, which is negotiated raises. I'm going to skip over additions and longevity. Those four are fixed cost. Those are must-adds to this budget. The staff additions, the 7.8 positions we like to add, again, generated on increasing student achievement, is something we could discuss. Again, we're presenting to you the budget we feel that will move the district forward. So it's an $18.9 million budget for personnel. It's an increase of $1.7 million, 9.95%. When I put minimum there, when I show you the $18.3 million, what I've done is removed the approximate $500,000 for the 7.8 positions. So showing you the delta between the two. But you're also making the point that that $18.3 million, almost $18.4 million, that's a must for us. That is a must for us in personnel. So again, we're looking to add 7.8 positions, and here's a list of them right there. Now, in your budget book, there's a tab for new request. And with that tab section in your budget book are the rationales, detailed rationales for each one of those positions, all connected to the work that's going on in the school system. So happy to go into detail with any of those. So if we take 80% of the request, or 80% of the budget, and we know it's for staffing and for personnel, the other 20% are the expenses to run the school system. And so that's what I'm showing you here. $13 million approximately being spent this year. We want to need to increase it by $500,000, so 13.5 to 3.9% increase just for expenses. And so again, I'll show you the major drivers for this. And listed here, first is technology and things we want to do to our infrastructure, online subscription, and device purchase for our staff and students. Athletics, which is a small increase, but it's also been a portion of our budget that's somewhat been neglected. And again, this is a small increase to keep a fine athletic program running to superior levels. That transportation there, the $96 million, that is a mandated fixed cost. That's our contract. That's the increase of both our in-district and out-of-district transportation for students. And the maintenance contract is an investment in the heating system of all 5 of our schools. We have highly technological systems at the middle school and the high school right now, and certainly the systems at all 3 elementary schools, which are only about 10 years old. That contract allows us to keep those systems functioning at high levels. So that's what's driving that increase in expense. I want to share with you some requests for capital. Now, in the budget request I'm making in front of you today, that 7% budget, it's devoid of capital. We've left capital outside the operating budget where it should reside. So it's being sought as its own funding source. Now, when you go to your budget book, you're gonna see a detailed 5-year capital request for the Tiverton Public Schools. And in the first year, you're gonna see a lot of items in that column for 20. What I've done here is taken out the 5 most important, the 5 that absolutely need to be funded for us to continue to move forward with safety and the needs of the school system. So, again, if there was more revenue, you can see the list that's in your budget book. For the presentation purposes this evening, we've got an intercom system at the high school, so the intercom does not work in the common areas, which means we do not have an intercom in our auditorium, our cafeteria, our library, which puts us vulnerable at situations where we need to get announcements out to students. We cannot do that. I know many of you were on the tour at the middle school and the high school, so renovate bathrooms, probably enough said there. Important that they are in deplorable conditions, but most importantly, they're not ADA compliant, which means they're not meeting the handicap laws at this time. So that's both at the high school and the middle school. The front doors at the middle school need to be replaced. They're not latching appropriately at all times. It's a safety concern for us. And then there's a small amount to repair the tennis courts at the high school. It's one of those things where if we invest $5,000 now, it takes care of a problem, or it's a $50,000 problem in a few more years. So that's 5 major items on a capital list that we present to you for your consideration. So just some understanding of the Tiverton Public Schools budget over the last few years here. On the last 5 fiscal years, or the last 4 fiscal years, and the request for this year, I'm showing to you how the budget has increased. And coincidingly to the far right column there, the fund balance, which is an amount that certainly has come under scrutiny and needs understanding, and certainly we'll provide a lot of detail on that this evening. But you can see how the fund balance has gone from a high of $4.4 million down to currently a little less than $1 million, and that's been the investment in both the middle school and the high school project in many parts of the building that have been repaired and funded through the fund balance. And so when I began the presentation to you, I spoke to you about this is an educational plan. This is how we educate students in the 21st century. Critical skills here. And I think this should hopefully cause you to think about this budget in hopefully high levels. I'm showing to you here that in 2017, 20 students didn't graduate. And last year, 15 students didn't graduate. This is 2019. High school should have 99% graduation rates. It shouldn't happen. Now, what I can tell you is that the staff in this district is committed. The school committee is committed. People are working hard as they can, 180 days a year. I mean, we just need a little more support to pull this off. And what I'm saying to you is, when I work with the administrators, and I had a meeting with the principals in the district just today, I can almost guarantee you that if this budget gets funded and we get the support we need, we'll get that to 100% in a couple years. There's no doubt about it. It's just the programming and it's the courses we want to offer, and it's having the appropriate staffing, the appropriate infrastructure to do so. But anything below 99, 98% just cannot happen in this day and age. I mean, our students need to go to post-secondary education. High school education that is a recipe for incarceration. It's a recipe for poverty. It's a recipe and a drain on the system. And we can do better, and there's no doubt about that. So the key thing to that is, do you trust me? Because I'm asking you to invest, because you have to invest at first before we get results. There's no doubt about that. You have to invest first. I can't produce results to you without an investment in this district. And when I say trust me, it's not me. It's everyone who works there. It's all 400 employees of Tiverton Public Schools. That's what we're asking you. So to break this down just a little more detail for you, some exact numbers here. The budget I've been presenting to you all evening is about a 7.3% budget. It requires an investment of $2.2 million, but we will break out state aid. So it's a town investment then of $1.4 million, or 4.8%. And that achieves the budget I've been presenting you to this evening. It's all the fixed and mandated costs. It's 7.8 FTE. It's increases for technology, curriculum, and athletics there. It still leaves that capital on the outside, but it funds everything else. So another scenario to present to you is a 5.8% budget. And that requires a little less revenue, 1.7 million. But again, you back out state aid, and it's an investment of $1 million by the town, or about 3.3%.
So Peter, that's a correction, I think, from what you guys have on here. You probably see 4.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Corrected after those were printed.
Yeah, and that's what, we had moved some items from capital, thank you, Ms. Palish, from capital into the operating budget. And so what that does then is it, again, meets our fixed and mandated costs. It doesn't provide for staffing, but it does, and it reduces the technology and curriculum and athletic budget, but it leaves a little something in there for them, but it covers our fixed and mandated cost. Again, it leaves capital on the outside, still looking for funding. And then there's this scenario here, which sort of replicates what's happened the last couple years, where state aid has been provided to the schools, and there's been this, $1 investment from the town. And so if that was to happen, that would bring the budget in at 31 million. That number in red at the top. And just to meet all of our fixed and mandated costs with no increases in staff, and I strip every expense account down to its bare bones and don't provide anything for curriculum, and provide nothing in technology, provide nothing new for our staff, that's the minimum would be a $31.45 million budget. So if we were left with state aid and a dollar investment, we're short $463,000, $297. And so again, what I want to impress to you is that I'm saying to you, I've stripped the 20% of the budget, the expense accounts. There's nowhere else to go. What's left is what it costs to heat the buildings, the electricity, our transportation contract, things of that nature. The only place that deficit can be addressed is through personnel. So I'm saying to you that we'd like to add a few people because we think we could do better for our students. If we're left with cutting that, that's probably cutting 9 to 10 teachers or staff members. So again, it's a scenario that I hope we're not discussing at length at all. And then I'm just going to close the presentation because you saw that there was a significant COLA increase, and we've negotiated contracts with our with our major union for our teachers and closing in on that. And the school committee did an amazing job understanding the needs of our teachers in the district and looking back historically on what's been provided. And so what I want to show you is 3 slides here. This is with the raise. This is comparing our salary scale this year, right now, with our raise incorporated, to some surrounding towns. And certainly it's moving in the right direction, and I commend the school committee for their actions to try to increase that, but you can still see it's on the low end. And here, so that was step 1. This is after 5 years of working in our district. The gap gets a little closer, but you can still see Tiverton's, down the end there. And this is at the end of your career, at top step, comparing us to other communities. So it's trending, I guess, positively, but I guess I want to show you that investment is important. In a couple weeks, we'll have our administrators at 3 different job fairs around the state recruiting teachers to fill our vacancies. And, this is what we're up against. This is, so the investment was important to make, but by no means was it exorbitant, or by no means did it, did it put these teachers anywhere but in a place where, they're being compensated and probably should be compensated even higher. So there's a lot of information there. I'm certainly going to be happy to answer any of your questions. Just to sort of talk you through the book that you have this evening. So the supporting data is actually the PowerPoint presentation you have. And then salaries and wages, that's the tab, that 80% of the budget. There you can see every salary or stipend that we pay for every member of our staff. And then the operating expenses, it gets into that other 20%. So you can see how that's broken out. whether it's benefits or, again, special ed transportation or special ed tuitions or energy. Then you have the new request, which is sort of details behind the ask for 7.8 FTE and some stipend positions. Then you have that detailed capital plan there that shows you a 5-year plan with all the needs of all 5 of our schools and our fields. And again, the numbers that are in red are the 5 that I pulled out for this year. And then under additional information, I've given you a summary of our federal and state grants and revenue that we bring in outside of the operating budget, but again, mentioning to you that that is earmarked for specific reasons and for specific purposes. So, a lot there to look at, and happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cencioni. That's very comprehensive and great backup information. I think what we'll do is, if anyone else wanted to speak to the budget, then we were going to go around our table with questions. Dr. Larkin?
I just have one comment, and that is we recognize this is a lot of information that you're getting tonight, and we really do look at this as a dialogue. We'd be happy to come back at some further point in the budget season to sort of continue to hopefully elucidate the details of everything and talk about this.
Thank you that very much for that offer. We'll probably just go through some questions tonight then.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then-
absolutely.
And then continue if needed. That's great. Thank you. Who would like, Joe, would you like to start with any of your questions on the school budget?
Jeff gonna do the fund balance?
Okay, Justin?
I would just like to personally thank you all for putting this presentation together. I have 3 children, possibly soon to be 4, in the school system. They've been a direct benefit of the hard work that the teachers and staff have put their time and efforts into, and they're absolutely blossoming. So I look forward to getting this budget done in the best way that we can. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I do have a fund balance presentation, so that's really up to you if you'd like to have it now, or if you'd like to just ask your questions on Dr. Sanchioni's presentation and then have me do mine separately. I'll leave that up to the board to decide how they'd like to do that.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have the questions on his presentation first. That way it's more close to what he just said, so. So then we are at J.
I'm currently overwhelmed. So it's going to take us a little while to adjust all this and really get into it, so any questions I have now would be pointless.
Okay. Tom?
Right, I too am concerned about wasting your time with questions that I would rethink later. But I'm just curious, you listed salaries, in business I was in before, we would list costs of people, because there's benefits involved, et cetera. Where does that stuff show up?
On the expense side,
Yeah, right.
you'll see some line items.
Oh, line items for that, okay. All right. Is there like a factor? Could you just take a salary and go, it's 2.5 times the salary is what it costs per person?
Usually about 30%. Yeah, that high? No. Depends on what they go. Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that. But we can get to that answer, how's that?
I've stepped over the line. I'm done for now, thank you.
Some are married, some are not.
Yeah. Thank you.
My questions are more along a little detailed lines. I think I've always wondered, when I see buses going by and sometimes as they're not filled, is there any way, and we're talking environmentally too, ways to get smaller buses for the certain routes, or have you already looked at that? That's just one of my questions. It's kind of, I know, detailed, but I'm just curious on cost savings and environmental saving too.
So we have,
Okay.
and through the last 2 cycles of negotiating that contract, and the short answer is we have not been able to get any cost savings other than what we have right now. So one of the things too is that a lot of people drive their kids to school, but the capacity has to remain the same for the entire student body.
Oh, interesting,
So-
okay. Thank you.
So that is one of the reasons why you see as many buses maybe as you do when it doesn't seem like there's as many kids on the bus sometimes to me.
And then another thing on everybody's mind these days is the safety aspect of the schools and the students. So I had a question about the intercom system, for example. It looks like that if, let's say, there was a compromising entity inside the school for whatever reason, hopefully not, but then you wouldn't be able to really use the intercom system for that. I mean, I think that people have been talking about silent alerts to computers or phones for that kind of thing. And I'm just wondering if you've, is the intercom system, can you give me some more uses, the general uses of the intercom system and why the old one doesn't work? What the new one, did the common areas intercom system used to work? It did used to work, and that is the only part that does not work now. It's just confusing to me, you know, how that whole scenario.
Yeah, so it doesn't work because it's built, it was installed at the time the high school was built, so it's that old. And it's just failed in those areas for some reason. Actually, let me add to you that the intercom in the classrooms was an upgraded system, and for some reason that part wasn't completed. And I would say to you that in time of emergency, that intercom is still vitally important to us, that we need to get information out to students who may be in those areas. And right now, we're leaving it upon our administrative team or, you know, a courier system to kind of run in there and deliver it verbally, which isn't the swiftest or the most efficient way to do that.
Right, okay. Okay, and are you planning any kind of silent alert system, like to people's phones or laptops or anything like that? Just wondering, because I think some schools do that.
We can't get into that.
Can't get
That's
in.
protected information.
Protected information, okay.
So-
That's
So just to speak to security issues, this committee would have to convene an executive and discuss that with you in executive because it's protected information.
Okay, thank you. We just want you to know that we do care about those
And,
issues.
and we appreciate that absolutely. And,
Okay.
and, you know, of course, one of the things that we have to appreciate is that we can't talk about our security issues in
Totally
public
understood.
session.
Just, yeah, I didn't know that was in that category. I think I'm all set for now. Questions later. Sherry?
Thank you for putting together this presentation tonight. And it is a lot of information. I think I, for one, would like time to look at everything you guys have put together. The only question I had is, I know Sally had told us at the first meeting that we had that there was a special formula that came up with the state aid that we get. And so now, is this an amount that you guys, has there been any sort of significant change in the formula, or can we expect that amount to be set, or will it? So I guess what I'm trying to ask, is that going to be a set amount every year, that, or is it going to change? And I'm trying to make sure I ask this so that you understand what I'm saying. Is it going to be an amount that changes every year? And does that actually come off the bottom line of the budget for the school? So I know we get it back, or I shouldn't say get it back, that it's state aid that's given every year. But is that 772 something that will stay the same? So like you guys are funded every year, even if we decide to give you more money, it's level funded, right? So you at least have to get what you were given the year before. So will that 772 also be something that stays the same every year?
I'll take this one if you want. So we get one number from the town. It's not bifurcated between town and state aid. It's just one number. So that is what our maintenance of effort is predicated upon. So if we get 30 million, maintenance of effort next year is 30 million plus $1. State aid, we do know that. I mean, that did come from RIDE's projected number, so we do know state aid, but I think your question is, if we get a total number and the state aid comes in a little bit short, does the town have to make it up? Yes. And it does fluctuate from year to year, but we usually know it ahead of time, and we try to communicate it to the committee
That's
ahead
what I
of
was
time.
basically wanting to see, do the taxpayers have to make up whatever the deficit is?
Yeah, because the way that state law is written, the school gets a number. So
Your state aid's based on your enrollment, correct? Which you won't have final, well, we won't know final enrollment until we start the school
Enrollment
year.
is one of the things, is one of the factors. There's a number of things that work into it, and it's a relatively complicated formula. The formula has not changed in, I think, over 10 years. And I do not know if the legislature has any appetite for taking it up again. There are communities that actually sort of are at a disadvantage because of the formula. We're not one of them. We've actually seen increases, at least in the last 2 to 3 years, and I think consistently do. But we do not have the level of support from the state that some other communities do, where their entire budget is funded at upwards of 70 or 80%. And those are large communities, unfortunately. There are large communities that have percentages like that. Ours, as you can see, is around 25%, a little bit less, actually.
Are you all set, Sherry?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, and I just forgot one of my questions, so I'm going to go back to it. The new positions look very wonderful, like physics, et cetera. All the new courses look really good with the technology being advanced, more advanced, and that looks great. Some of the things, the questions I might have, and for next time when you come back, along the lines of when you talk about remedial and tutors, those types of things, I would hope with all the, I know you're doing the teacher seminars and courses that you're sending them out on. I was hoping that maybe you wouldn't need as much remedial items to happen if the actual, that's a basic class were taught so well. And that brings me to my second question, which is what is the teacher-student ratio, if you can tell me that, and maybe a little of the history of it. I just remember when I was going to school, it was maybe 25 children, or 25 to 30 to a teacher, but I don't know what it is now, and how that, if you can just answer maybe some of that, and then I'll ask the rest of the detailed questions on the new positions next time you come back, but it's like,
So the student teacher, I mean, it's a question I can give you an average, and it doesn't always apply, obviously. At the elementary level, it's about 18 to 1. When you move up into the middle school, I mean, you could see some classes at 25, but then you could see some classes down in the 18, so I'd say the average is about 20. And the same thing at the high school, it might be, the average again is about 21. But again, I want to caution you, you could see a class of 11 kids, say, for AP Physics, but then you could get a U.S. History class one that might have 26 kids in it, so.
okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm just, next time you come back, I'm just want a little more on the new positions, but
Sure.
I'm all set now. Brendan?
You're set.
Oh, I thought you said you were finished.
No, that's okay. You know what, I'll just look over everything. I'm not looking to micromanage you and see if I can come up with any other questions.
Brendan?
Thank you.
Great. Thanks. And enjoyed and appreciate the time that you all took to show us the facilities. It was exciting to see the investment, particularly in the elementary schools, the quality of the facilities, to really be proud of what we have, and know that with the middle school and the high school, there's been money put into them and more to go. I had a couple of questions that to get started. The enrollment projections, and that was a subject of discussions we had in prior budget committee meetings, is getting some sense of if it goes up, we need more people. If it goes down, do we need less people? And so I guess I'd start with a question is it looks like it's leveled off. We have 2 years where we're roughly around the 1,800. Is there any sense of whether it's going to stay level, whether it might go back up or go down? And in particular, thinking about what this request is because it's going to be building again on a maintenance effort that gets set where we could have a fluctuating enrollment. So any guesses or thinking in terms of where we are as to where we think enrollment is headed?
Yeah, we do some detailed analysis around that. We use a birth cohort model. We sort of look at, the potential births in town and how that tracks up to kindergarten and so forth. And then you look at the town growth. And You probably saw the report. It looks like Tiverton potentially could be experiencing some significant growth with some new housing. And anytime you see more than one bedroom, you know that usually means that a student could be attached to that. So we've done some calculations on that. And so looking out on a 5-year trend, we're looking at that 1750, growing anywhere between 10 and 20 students. But I say that to you, it's more of an art than a science. A lot of people could move in, and it could really significantly grow.
Great. The second thing that's kind of related is, and pardon my ignorance, but looking at the distribution of teachers and their tenure within the school system. So a lot of what's driven in terms of cost is where teachers are within the STEP system and all. We know that when we bring people in at the first level, fifth level, we're already kind of below. But wondering, are we average in terms of where we are with people? Do we have older or younger? Because that's another one of those that may end up be driving numbers one way or another in terms of, in essence, the amount of tenure within the teachers.
Right, so I can show you a chart, and we can take our entire staff and show you the step that they're on. And let me show you that. I was going to give you a percent, but I'd rather be absolutely accurate on that.
Okay. And you had mentioned, and I'm with you, is if there was only the maintenance of effort, and you kind of said it pretty quickly, and I know you don't want to go there, but if you could reiterate those implications. So you had talked about staffing cuts, is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Could you?
Sure. So that was the last scenario in the 3 scenarios I presented to you in that presentation. I apologize if it was quick. But again, it was modeled after the funding that the schools have received for I believe the previous 2 years. Mm-hmm. And in essence, what that was take state aid and add $1.
Yep.
And so if that was to happen this year, take our current budget, add the $772 of state aid and $1, and you get a budget of $31,006,116. If you're looking at that slide, what I'm showing is that a bare bones, absolutely stripped down budget would be $31,469,413. And what I mean is that's just every teacher that we currently employ coming back, adding no one new, but taking every account. So that 20% of the budget, I remember 80% is governed by people, so that 20% doesn't give us a lot of latitude, but really just cutting everything. So it's just how much more do we need for oil, how much more do we need for electricity, that $96,000 for buses, any tuitions for special ed that are going up, calculating that, but not adding anything for athletics, technology, curriculum, so it's bare bones. That's what you need. You need a $31.4 million budget just to achieve that. And so the delta between the 30 million and the 34 is that 463. And the key point of understanding that is if the 20% is down to just those things I described, like you can't cut anymore. I mean, you're shutting the lights off, or you're not, things like that. Where else can you go? You have to shift the deficit to personnel. Mm-hmm. And so 463, 297 means, I don't know, do a quick math, $50,000 per teacher, you're looking at 8 to 9 staff members.
Okay. Great. Okay, good. I wanted to follow that logic. So on the other side, you had started out with sort of the argument is to say an investment, a 7% increase, the net to the town is 5% to us. There's the list of, and in particular, is looking at these additional FTEs is a big driver of that. Could you talk about, and the hope too is that this would be a big driver of improving graduation rates and how these fit. It looks like there's a nice distribution, quickly looking at it, and you can come back and talk to it, but is that among the various schools, but it's in various like administrative support things as well as direct classroom teaching, so physics being one of those. How do you kind of come up with these in terms of driving, saying this is where we can really move the needle in terms of student outcomes with these roughly 8 FTEs?
Yeah, that's a detailed conversation that I have with the principals and they have with the members of their staff at their buildings. And just looking at the data on our students, looking at all of our scores, looking at our behavior rubrics, looking at students who may need help for ELL or SEL, social emotional needs and so forth, and kind of bringing that all together. So when I show you that we're, the 7.8 FTE request here, this original list was probably 15 point something. I mean, we try to be fiscally observant and cognizant. There's certainly other things that could have been added that just didn't make it onto this list. But again, if you read the rationale for each one of those, our principals really thought hard about each one of their schools and what could make, the thing we always say is what's going to make a difference, what can make a difference. And these positions we put on here, we felt met that category.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sorry, can I add to your comment, Justin? Does this?
Brendan. We're on the record.
Brendan, does this come into your calculations? What jobs are in the future in the marketplace? What industries are opening up for more jobs for these graduates and going into college also, but both ways? Does the job market have anything? Did you look at that? Is that part of your calculation? I just wondered.
It is. I wouldn't say
Everything's getting
that
more technological. Go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
may not be directly related to these positions here. These are meeting some very specific needs, but every year we sort of recalculate the staff we have. So adding these positions in with the current staff gives us the opportunity to think about what we'd like to do at each level. And so one of the things I provided you is you sort of flip through our FTE request, you're going to get to a document that talks about Tiverton High School new courses. And so achieving this staff with the existing staff, these are courses that we want to add in to those offerings that we feel is going to increase that graduation rate, but also get to what you're saying is, the 21st century, we're preparing our kids with some skills that are transferable or attractive at the college level or at the employee level.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interject. Jennifer?
Thank you. This is very helpful. Thanks. I can't support enough I can't say enough how important it is to upgrade the bathrooms in the middle school and the high school. We finally have new buildings for our elementary schools, but the middle school especially is just improper. And for young adolescent kids who are coming of age, they're young adults, and when you walk into a bathroom that is, the doors pop open, they've been popping open. Both my kids went to Tiverton Middle School. I don't feel comfortable in those bathrooms washing my hands, worried that I might be intruding on someone. So I certainly hope our town can take care of that at great long last. I have a question with the athletic programs. Are there as many programs for the girls as there are for the boys?
Yeah, that's required under Title IX.
Okay. I would just at a quick glance, there are 5 positions for football, and it's hard to add them up on the 3 or 4 pages to see that there's an equivalent. So I was just asking.
Yeah, so the law is the opportunity. It's not so much, that once you establish the sport and you have equal opportunities for students to play sports, your coaching wouldn't fit into that then, because then you would assign your coaches based upon the number of students participating in that. So if we had a girls' team that had, 40 members to it, we would staff it appropriately.
Okay. And then uniforms for students, is that, where do monies come for that? Is that is that fundraising outside? It's a mix. Because I know there's been a problem, for instance, for girls lacrosse. Didn't have uniforms for the longest time. I don't know. I haven't been at the high school lately, but the guys had them and the girls didn't, and it was years and years and years.
Yeah, the majority of uniforms are through fundraising. There may have been
So that's not a budget item. But
Typically not.
there wasn't equity in the past
Was not.
with uniforms.
That's certainly something we could look into in more detail.
Okay.
And I think that's a,
So just
very-
a
very
point of
good
parity.
concern or, a
Yeah,
good-
I
a
think
good
it's
thing to bring up.
really important.
But most of the sort of support of the teams beyond the coaching is usually done through parent group fundraising.
Okay.
Booster clubs,
Booster clubs, yeah,
Mm-hmm,
generally. And, things are kind of used year after year after year, so.
Okay. And I think one thing that I've heard a couple years in a row from members of the Budget Committee and also of the Town Council is this drop in the number of students in our town, and a very quick assumption that you can just right off the bat get rid of a whole slew of teachers if you have 100 students less than you did 2 years ago. Can you speak to that? Why that it's not so easy to cover all of the different courses that need to be covered to teach math, physics, English, Spanish, and everything else? Why we can't just cut the budget by 5% because we have 5% fewer students?
Yeah, that's a great question. You've sort of provided part of the answer in the courses that we need to provide. Rhode Island has some strict graduation requirements. Every student has to have 4 years of English and math and lab science and social studies and some other things that go on with that, so we've got to provide that opportunity. But then secondarily, when you look at a decline, and I would call 100 students a small decline, you're taking those students over a K-12 system. So if you pluck a couple kids out of every grade level, maybe a few out of every school, you're not decreasing the capacity enough to cut a teacher or eliminate a classroom. The class size might be a little smaller, a little more ideal for the students who are there, but it doesn't, your capacity still remains. You still have enough students to have that classroom, that number of teachers and so forth. And when it starts getting, when you start talking 200-300 students, you might then be able to say, okay, maybe there's one grade level you could, and which is what we do. You can see that historically, and it's an annual rite of passage for the principals to look at every student in their school and the number of students in every one of the classrooms and see what we need for staffing.
I've got some other technology questions, but I need more time to formulate, so that'll come later. Thank you for your time.
Deb?
This presentation is just, it's fabulous. There's a lot to digest, and I would love for you to come back so that we can ask more specific questions. But I have just a couple. How do you determine the graduation rate? Is it the students who start as a senior and don't graduate, or does it start junior year?
No, it starts when they're actually freshmen, and that cohort of students, if they stay in Tiverton and they're expected to graduate within 4 years. And so, what's the remaining percent of that cohort? Now, there's always some mitigating factors, and certainly kids who move out or something like that wouldn't be held against us. But there's some things that we can use to calculate it. But when I show you that those students who didn't graduate, they were in that cohort and should have graduated or could have graduated.
So between freshman year and senior year, we lost 20 students.
Well, we didn't lose them. They were in the system and either dropped out and should have gone through the school system, or just didn't accrue enough credits then to achieve that diploma at that point in time. Now, there's an opportunity, certainly, if they came back. And sometimes we do a rush with summer school or things of that nature. But the way the state, so it's apples to apples, so that all schools are tracked identically. It's when you start as a freshman, and do you get there in May or June of your senior year?
Thank you. So also, the capacity of our classrooms, are we at full now? Because if we're looking at trending going up, and there certainly are some developments that are coming into town or potentially coming into town, what would that do to the classroom sizes that we have now?
So you heard me say there's a range right now, anywhere between, say, a low of, well, depending at the, if I take the high school out of it, which has some peculiarities that drive class size, but at the middle school and the elementary level, you know, we got some lows in the 15, 16s and some highs up at the 20, 22. So there's capacity to absorb some more students, and I think what might be helpful, and be glad to do this next time we come before you, is bring you that staffing, that class size report, so you can actually see every class that we have.
Okay. So not that we want to be at level funding, but if that were to happen, would we go over the maximum allowed by state requirements in some of the classrooms? And are we even allowed to do that?
There's more contractual issues than state. States are more, the state is more like a guideline, and local still has control on that. And so are you asking me, would that happen if we had that $400,000 deficit?
Right.
I would say to you, there's staff that are going to be cut, and we would try our hardest not to let that happen, but it's going to be an excruciating process. There's going to be impacts if that happens.
And would that impact us with any grants or any funding? I mean, obviously, we don't want, 30 kids in a
Right.
classroom, but
Right.
would that impact us with any other violations or penalties?
Well, again, contractually, there's going to be some issues there that we'd have to resolve. I can't think of any grants. I mean, most of our grants, our highest funded grants are entitlement grants, which are based upon the population. So our IDA, our grant for special education, our Title I grant, all that wouldn't be affected by those type of cuts?
I hope we're never there.
Thank you.
And the new proposed positions, I would love to look at those a little bit more. It looks like they're spread throughout the whole school system, elementary through high school, which is obviously where we need to start. And the capital equipment, I can't say enough about the bathrooms. They're the same bathrooms that were in the high school when I was there. Granted, just a few years ago, right? But they are the same bathrooms that were there in the 60s. So we need to, we could put paint on them, and the volunteers at the middle school, great job, but it's paint, and there's only so much paint you can put on a bathroom. So,
As you heard me say, the fixtures are non-compliant anymore. I mean, it's a collision course to be cited and deal with it at a higher level.
so I really would like to look more over this, and
do.
if you could come back, and I'm sure we'll have more questions, but this was an excellent presentation. There's so much information, and the plan is really, really exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Jen?
Last but not least, thank you very much for a great presentation. I also want to add that I currently have 2 children in the Tiverton School Department. I have a daughter at the middle school, and I have a son at Picasset. And I appreciate every teacher that they've had, every administrator that they've had, and I do believe that they're getting quality education in our school system, so I fully support you there. The questions that I have is, if we are at the dollar, which I'm hoping that we're not, and we do have this 463 deficit, what kind of classes or opportunities would we see removed from our children that they currently have?
Yeah, Jen, that's a great question, but that's an unfair question right now. I mean, that's a question where, we get in with the principals and
Because obviously, with a preteen daughter, I'm thinking about opportunities for college and what kind of classes that she will be able to take and what her opportunities will be versus competing with other school districts and what she's currently not able to take at this level. So how will that impact student opportunity for further education by not being able to have these educational opportunities now?
I'd say to you, you have a tab section in your binder here, and literally I have given you the cost of every personnel that we currently employ in the district, both our clubs, our activities, and our staff. So, you want to find 463 in cuts, we can talk. But I think if you start just looking through the list here and start thinking, wow, where's that going to come from? You'll right away realize it's going to be painful.
Can I just sort of add to Dr. Sanchioni's answer, to both Ms. Janik and to you, Jen. So you can absolutely get into trouble cutting positions and reducing the number of teachers you have per student, or, you know, trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, or really more like a Rubik's Cube of, I've got this many students in a grade, I need this many teachers, can I move someone there, can they be splitting? So yes, you can absolutely get in trouble, and perhaps it would start to make a foundation that's going to consider you for a grant look at your system and sort of say, well, you know, the community's not really, you know, got it together that well and supporting it, so we're going to maybe fund something else. And then just to answer your question, Jen, about, you know, sort of what does it do? It clearly diminishes the opportunity that our students have. So where will it diminish the opportunity? That's, you know, ultimately the decision of the principals and the superintendent and the school committee, but it will certainly be diminished if that's what we're looking at, starting to cut positions.
I have one other question too about staffing. So when we met with police and fire, we kind of hear about how they lose to other towns, that it might be morale, it might be better pay. Are you currently finding that as well, that you lose some staff?
Yes.
And about at what rate per year? Is there one year that's more than another?
I don't know if I could give you a rate. I don't know if you could give them a rate, but certainly I've seen, you know, in every meeting where we are accepting a resignation, it's, you know, heart-wrenching to sort of see a really good teacher sometimes going for a different opportunity, and that's, you know, you cheer them on for that, but you know it's also for salary sometimes. And it's communities that are very close to us.
Hi, I'm Mr. Cabral. I'm the Ranger School principal. As far as staffing, we see a lot of candidates come in to interview. That's where we lose our candidates. If we're going to lose candidates because of money, we lose them during the interview process. A lot of times our number one candidate, once they check out what the salary is, they'll go to another district. Once people come to town, we don't lose very many people once they come to town. We lose a lot of people during the interview process.
Thank you.
One other point I'd like to make, the elementary schools are packed.
I was going to ask this.
We have 2 classes per grade in all 3 elementary schools. So our average class size in the elementary is probably 22 to 25. 25 is cap unless students come in after September 1. Then we go to 27. At Ranger School, we have a bubble class in grade 1, which our class size is smaller because we had more than 50 kids coming in September 1. So as soon as we go over 50, that's another section we got to create. So the numbers, the point that I'm trying to make, if cuts have to come, cuts are going to come from the middle school and the high school. Because that's the only place it can come from.
Can I ask another, then I don't know who I'm asking this to, but if we're talking about elementaries being at capacity, how many children are moved from, like, they may live in Ranger District, but they may have to go to another school because the space is available at another school, and then next year they may have to be moved back, so they may shift and shutter?
There are students that go to out of district, we call that an out of district placement, when they come in. Once they get to a school, we try to keep that student at that school as long as the cap's is not met. Sometimes parents will request to come to other schools. Those requests are out-of-district requests that go through the superintendent's office as well as the principals. So there are some students that are out of district. If it's a parent request, the parent provides transportation. If it's a district request, because we're at class cap at one school, then that's an expense that we have to pick up. So the elementary schools, if you look at the elementary schools, we have one classroom in each one of the buildings for expansion. After that, we're a cap.
Did you see that grow after kindergarten was added?
We saw a lot of students starting, when we went to full day K, we saw a lot of students start in Tiverton and stay in Tiverton. What we used to see is our kindergarten classes would be smaller and a lot of kids would come in grade 1. So it's been more of a steady enrollment since we've gone to full day K. The other thing, as far as buses, if you look at the buses, the elementary level buses are packed. We've got between 50 and 70 kids on every one of those buses.
You see a drop in middle school because the kids get either driven in or they start to drive in high school as
And
well.
plus, a lot of the kids at the middle school and high school start doing activities. You know what I mean? So they stay after school for different activities, so they're not on the afternoon bus. And like you said, a lot of parents do drop. We have a lot of parents still dropping off at the elementary school. That's a decision the parents make. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no
All set.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you again.
thank you. We're going to move on. Deb Palish, would you provide a presentation?
Oh, I have a board
And this is the fund balance presentation.
This is fund balance. So the first page you have, I'm just going to we're starting at the 6/30/2008 totals per audit. So if you look at the numbers that were just audited, you're going to see a fund balance for the school of $4,270,625. It will be split out, $2.9 million committed, $1.3 million uncommitted. So that comes right from the audited financials that were just released. So that's where we wanted to start. Rolling into FY19, we do expect a budget shortfall, and that is primarily because we did not budget for the full salary increase that we ultimately negotiated. For going to FY20, obviously we're not projecting a shortfall this year, and we do have $250,000. Dr. Sanchioni wants to add a K-8 literacy program, and we felt that one-time expense better fit coming out of our fund balance. As Dr. Sanchioni has noted, that other $316,000, we are going to be looking to be shifting that capital back to how the municipal side is funding. So where you do the police cars and you do the ambulances, and 7-8 years ago, we always did the school capital that way. There was a shift in philosophy that they wanted the schools to do it. That seems to be the philosophy shifting back. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But right now, if you to the next page, the $3.2 million. So of that balance, it's all restricted for education aid, but the school committee itself as a board has committed 3.2 of it, meaning we're intending to spend it. And now on this next page, you'll see either where we've spent it or where we intend on spending it. You can sort of go through the list here. We've been working really hard. We have a finance subcommittee now that is Mrs. Farnworth, myself, Dr. Sanchioni, and our director of finance, really digging into these commitments and making sure we know what they are, when they're going to come, if they did come. So what you'll see all the commitments, and then you'll see spent to date. So the first thing I want to point out is in the light orange. Those were basically things that were committed in FY17 and FY18 that we were able to spend through operations, meaning we did not have to take them out of fund balance. We were able to cover them in those fiscal years through operations. What we'll be going back to the full school committee to do is we're going to be recommending that we uncommit them, meaning that we'll just move them over into the uncommitted fund balance. Then we have 1.67 million that we've spent to date. And you'll see that in purple. That money has been spent in FY19. So it's gone. So that gives you that. We have about 1.1 million left that it's still committed, but we haven't spent it yet. You will see over to the far right, it says remaining to be spent. There's 2 items there, reserved for Wi-Fi. We committed that in FY17 because RIDE was supposed to help districts with Wi-Fi, but you had to basically, it was a match. So we set that aside. We've went a couple of years now, and RIDE is still discussing it. So we are leaving it out there. Whether it actually, they end up helping and they need a match, we don't really know. That's why I put a question mark. Hazardous window sealant, emergency science fixtures. Our last finance subcommittee meeting, we are actually having our maintenance director look into that, whether that was actually done or not. So I didn't want to say it was spent. I didn't want to say it was, not spent. He is actually researching that. The couple of things here, the fire and safety doors, we intend to do that in FY19. And just to be clear, those are the doors, not the doors that come in. Those are the doors inside. So once you get through the middle school, you know how that second set of doors. So we had to reconfigure that entire thing to make it both safe, and then there were fire issues with it too. So we ended up really having to redo. So that will be done this year. Replacing exterior doors will be done this year. The gym dividers, classroom dividers, water fountains, we're either doing that or we might actually have spent that already since our last meeting. And then FY20, you'll see the K-8 literacy. So that sort of shows you that of the 3.2 million that was committed, we have spent, 1.7 of it, 400,000 of it we're going to uncommit because we were able to cover it with operations. And I do want to make a point that we were able to cover it from operations because our past director of finance, he was known as the king of no. So if we had a year where snow removal wasn't as much, so we knew our snow removal budget was going to be, we were going to have some excess. If someone went and said, hey, I have a great new program, can I spend it? He would say, no, we need to build our fund balance. So that's why you'll see certain things were covered through operations, but it was purposeful. It was, we're not going to, because we could have spent that money on something else. I mean, we could have, instead of covering the rain garden, we could have, added a program. But he was very purposeful in trying to build the fund balance because, again, the philosophy at the time was we were going to be responsible for our own capital needs. So that's kind of where we are. If you look at on the bottom, if we uncommit that 407, that leaves us with an uncommitted balance of 997,499. FY20's budget as presented to you is 32,354,000. That's about 3% of our total budget. And I know that's part of the conversation we all need to have as a community. How much is that? How much is enough? Because to date, we've been doing 2 things with that fund balance. It's our contingency fund, because remember, we don't put a contingency fund like the town council does in our operations, because if we do, it increases our maintenance of effort. So we do not do that. We don't want that baked into the budget. If Jeff was here, is what he would say. So we manage our contingencies through our fund balance. So if we have a special needs student that comes in and needs has needs that we want to meet and need to meet, and it's an outplacement, it's 250,000 that we didn't plan on, this is where we would go to our fund balance to manage that. So there's a real discussion to be had of how big should that be? Should it be 2%? Should it be 3%? And the other part of that discussion is if the community, if the budget committee wants us to fund our own capital needs, so this 316,000, then we need to build this fund balance. We can't, I mean, that was kind of the frustration, is we got really dinged a lot because we had so much in it, but that's because we were told you have to manage your own capital infrastructure needs. So the only way to do that is to have money in fund balance. So that's why it grew. But the last 2 years, that philosophy seems to have shifted. So, you know, we basically, you see it coming down now. So we need to have those two discussions, and I don't expect necessarily to have them tonight, but we need to talk about it at some point. How much is enough for contingencies, and are we going to shift that capital burden away from our fund balance to how you do municipal capital? So those are sort of the two conversations, but if anyone has any questions about the specifics of this, I'd be happy to jump in.
Why don't we go around the table? Joe? Justin? Jay? Oh,
Joe, I'm so disappointed.
Well, the only thing that's ever,
Okay, thank you.
the only thing that really, I don't understand, how do you accumulate a fund balance? I mean, there's no line item in the school budget that says fund balance.
Through savings.
So we're not,
So I said he was the king of no. If we knew something was going to be positive and we knew there was a positive line item, that we knew there was going to be savings, we would not spend it on something else, and we would purposely keep it and say we're going to save it to build our fund balance.
so if the state gives you more than they said they would, or if special ed didn't cost quite as much as
Yes,
you thought it would,
yes.
if you roll all those things together, then.
And
other
there
departments-
was last year, if you all remember, there was a one-time drawdown of a grant that was pretty large that also helped build it.
Okay, so whereas other departments in the town would just kick that back to the
General fund.
general fund, you don't, you kick it into your fund balance.
We can't put it back in the
Yeah, we
general
can't, you can't go
understand
back,
that.
yeah.
But there was a
But-
big,
and-
huge discussion about this last year.
Correct, there was. And I would say a lot of it, well, not a lot of it, but certainly some of it came from trying to predict special education costs and those shifting around a lot over the course of several years, so.
I will say too, because I have heard this argument. Well, 3% of the general fund really belongs to you, because when charter says 3% of the total budget, which includes our budget, needs to be in reserves. But the reality is, think about how we'd have to access that. If we had a $250,000, $300,000 child who needed to go out of district that we didn't budget for, we knew we couldn't cover it, we would either have to have an FTR to appropriate that money to us. Really, that's the only way. I know the council can declare a state of emergency to access that fund, but I highly doubt that would qualify as that. So really, the only way we'd have access to that 3% set aside is if we got permission, either through council vote or through a petition, to hold another FTR. And understand, we have 1,800 kids that, we're, educating during that period of time, and we have a responsibility, as you all know. If we expect a deficit, we have to report to the municipal finance. We have to report to them, we have a deficit, we have to come up with a corrective action plan in 60 days, I want to say. So that's a serious thing. So yes, there are monies over in the general fund, but it's just they're not easily accessible during a school year. So we use our fund balance to be that contingency. And again, in the past, we've used it for capital. But there seems to be a shift and perhaps a thought process that the budget committee should control that and not have us managing our own capital. But again, that's fine, but it needs to then come up on the municipal capital request.
Okay, well, no, I understand it a little better. I was just wondering how it comes about, and
Yeah.
it's clear that you do use it for things within the school, which ultimately helps us with our tax rate, so.
Well, I
It's
mean,
not like it's a slush fund, which was characterized last year.
It is not a slush.
It is
we
not.
would not characterize it that way. I'm not going to speak for
I wouldn't
anyone
either.
else. Yeah.
You can see it on the ceilings of the schools, however.
Yeah.
Well, that's my.
And I think Sally has made the point in the past, this is one of the things that, when we had a huge septic issue, $700,000, we were able to tap into our fund balance instead of having to come to the town. So we do try to manage it responsibly. I know there for a while, as we were building it probably seemed like we weren't, and we understood that. And perhaps having a dialogue and a sheet or something like this would have been more helpful, to hopefully everyone understanding what we are trying to do and what we have done. And we are, as a finance subcommittee, really trying to have a lot more transparency with this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Deb. This is very helpful. Appreciate it.
I'm not going to go back to last year in detail, but I thought there were some state regulations that also come into play on that fund balance. Maybe I'm wrong.
The only state regulation that I can think of is that it has to stay with the schools. I don't know, you may be thinking of the ride requirements for reimbursement? Maybe, I'm not sure.
I'll look into it for the
Okay,
next
all
time you
right,
guys
okay,
come back.
perfect.
And the only question that I had that, first off, I did forget to say, I'm glad to see that special education is getting, something to look at, because I heard from a lot of parents during the election that they didn't feel like that more special education was needed in the elementary schools and things like that. But I also don't see, I know when we were walking around the middle school, there were issues, and I don't know if this would be out of this fund, but I see fire and safety doors for the middle school. But the locks, because the classrooms go from one to another for active shooter, there weren't any locks, and the doors opened out into the hallway.
So that would be
that's
separate from this now, only because, as we said, we are now separating out that capital. We are not anticipating it, nor are we planning to pay for that from our fund balance. We would like that funded separately, so that would have been the part of the $316,000 that Dr. Sanquioni talked about earlier.
And do you happen to know when or what year they, and if you don't, that's fine, but what year they told you, like, that you guys had to manage your own capital? Or does that go back?
2013.
13, okay, that's.
No, it was way before that. It was long, it was back when Chris Cotta was chair. It's been 7 or 8 years. It's been a while. I can go back, because what I can do is I will give you an exact date next time we come back, because what you can see is you can see the docket when it was on, and then you can see the next docket where it was out. So I'll get a definite date for you, because it feels like 7 or 8. I don't, but I'll get a definite date, and I'll get those pages for you so you can see when it dropped.
Okay, thank you. That's it, thanks.
Brendan?
So, thanks. Both the first presentation and this one is really helpful. Last couple of years been on the budget committee. The discussion about the fund balance, how that money was going to be used, wasn't as clear to a lot of us. And this is much more clear, laying out, and in particular, looking at the last couple of years, how that fund balance has been used on specific line items. And I think, Deb, to your recent point is a contingency. And to know that a certain amount of what's in that fund balance had to be, it's 460,000 with the number, so it's helpful. I think the other thing, and I really think it's important and helpful for the town, is looking at us in terms of a capital plan, looking out multiple years.
Agree.
Is where do we think we are, rather than year to year to year. And I think in part, perhaps because you were doing this and doing this well, in part because of the way RIDE works, is they require you to be looking out so that they can anticipate matches that the state is going to provide. So I think the last thing, and maybe it's the next time coming back, is kind of marching out, so we have a very clear idea of where the fund balance has been spent down in the last couple of years, what's left it committed to it. We've got roughly 900 and something, so just under $1 million that's left, and your caution, I'm guessing, is saying.
That's contingency.
We need that for contingency and all, but that there's a number of other items that are out there of looking at what the buildings may need.
Is that your 5-year plan that's in? Yeah, so that's
Great.
in your,
So I applaud that. I mean, what we'll end up doing, I'm not sure, but it's certainly letting the taxpayers know this is what we see are needs of the school, looking out multiple years. So,
and I think that's a hard thing, the budget committee, you guys are gonna really have to grapple with that, because that 5-year plan, you have not only our needs, but you have the municipal needs, and that's a big job.
Thanks, Deb, for that understanding. Jennifer.
Just before we move on quickly, because Brendan, you asked the question, I just wanted to address it. Maintenance of effort, you said maintenance of effort when you were concerned if like the students, if all of a sudden there was a drop. I do want you to know there is a provision in the state law that if we do see a consistent drop, that maintenance of effort has a provision that will accommodate that decrease. So it's not like it's there and it'll never go away. If there was a sustained and documented decrease, there is a state law that accommodates it.
and I think that was also answered, was that the complexity of 100
Oh, yeah,
students
that
over
for sure.
many, grades, that it's just not a simple, we can get rid of,
Right.
of one class.
But if all of a sudden we lost 400 students and we could, I just
enough.
want you to realize there is a provision in state law that does
allow for that.
does allow for that.
Thank you.
Jen.
Deb, thank you for your time and explanation. I want to ask, you referred to SPED funding as something we need and we want to pay for, but aren't we required by state law? And aren't we
are.
required by state
let-
and national? So it's
Yeah.
beyond what we need and what we want. We have to.
Right, and that's why I was giving an
and-
example. If someone, you're right, we have
And
to.
I certainly, I do think we need to, and I do want to, but it's a requirement. So it's something that we have to accommodate.
And that's
for
certainly
in our
one of the
budget.
contingencies that we do think about a lot, because it does happen.
Right. The other thing is, I want to understand these fund balances and why, I want to understand a little better why budget committees in the past had said, you guys take care of that kind of capital thing. And I'm going to just sort of run the septic issue that we had out, that scenario. Isn't it true that the benefit of having money in the fund at the time when we had to replace our septic system that cost $700,000 at the time, if it wasn't there, we would have had to go out and do an FTR. And if we had to do that, we couldn't have operated our schools with a septic system that wasn't functioning. And if if we couldn't operate our schools, then we would have had to have sent our kids someplace else to go to school, and that would have been a colossal expense.
Yeah, that's sort of worst-case scenario.
So-
More likely what would have happened is if the DEM came in and said, we're going to shut you down, they're going to give you time, but if they said, for instance, we're going to shut you down in a month, we would have went to the council and asked them to declare a state of emergency and tap that general fund.
Okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't have let that happen, but you're right.
So a long time ago, what the budget committee was trying to do was, okay, when you have an emergency like this, you'll be able to build up money so that you'll have it and you can address these needs.
Honestly, I think it was part of, because when the fund, it's restricted to schools, so it's really hard to touch because it's restricted for schools. And I can't speak for Chris, but as I'm remembering correctly, part of the philosophy was it's really so restricted versus the general fund. So it was, why don't you guys build it, pay for your own capital, because it did, because it is so specific to schools, plus it took it off the municipal burden. I mean, I think we got at the same place, but I think that they just challenged us to find, we have a bigger budget, challenged us to find savings in order to, fund our own capital. I think it was just a way of helping to take the burden off when they had to include it in the municipal side. And I don't know that it did. I think we kind of get to the same place because now we're trying to build it, and it's hard to explain to people why you have a $4 million fund balance, because they see that and, well, why you don't need an operational budget, and you have to try to go out. But I think the philosophy was just because it was sort of restricted anyway, and at the time it sort of helped take the burden off the tax increase, if you will.
But there was an immediate utility to having
there certainly was.
To have that money there when you have those situations, when you have a sped student that, or 2 or 3 that drop in on your district, or when you have plant and operations emergency.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Just like the town council needs a contingency, we have to have a contingency. You can't just shut down a building. I mean,
And then one other question, and I don't know if who this would go to, is when we talk the graph on how the amount of money per student, does that include the SPED funds too? So
yeah.
So that's an average.
So that per pupil cost,
that
includes special ed.
Pure pupil.
It does.
Sorry.
It includes that.
Do you break those out and compare?
Do we break out the special ed costs?
Yeah, and compare across, like, Tiverton to Newport, the regular
yes
classrooms and
yes. Dr. Saint, we're part of, you guys, as some of you may know, some of you may not, we're part of the Newport County Regional Special Ed Collaborative. That's, right now, it's Middletown, Little Compton, and Tiverton, and Dr. Sanchioni actually sits on that board, and they do look at that.
Thank you.
This really helped, Deb. This really made things really clear. And just
Deb's
to kinda
rock.
Just come clear.
Deb's rock.
Yes. And just to kind of mirror on what Jen was saying, we could have one child come into our district and just really increase our costs significantly, a child with special needs, and we would need this fund for that. But I just have one question. The K through 8 literacy program, did you say that was a one-time cost?
It is, Dr. Sanchioni?
Yeah, it's been a while since the Tiverton Public Schools have implemented a K-8 literacy program, and so this is something you put in place and should last, a decade or so.
So what is, I guess I'm not understanding what it is. What is the cost for? Is it for materials or to purchase a program?
It's a
Training?
a curriculum that comes with training, and so that every teacher in the district who teaches literacy, reading, writing, or reading and writing for the 2 major things, has the same materials to deliver the same standards, so that the experience is consistent across the 3 elementary schools and across the different teachers at the middle school level, and so that we can look at results and data and make some good decisions about teaching and learning.
Do you know how long has it been that we have not had a literacy program?
A long time, but I bet Mr. Cabral could tell us.
20 years, he's saying back there.
The last program
20?
we purchased was a good 20 years ago. And
Yeah.
a lot of the instructional models changed.
I'm sure,
Oh,
I'm
it
sure,
would be very different.
sure.
Very different, Common Course.
We absolutely need that program. That will help get you those 20 students graduating.
All
Thank
tied
you.
together.
Actually, we need one for adults now and a new literacy.
And so because that was a one-time curriculum expense, we felt it it really fit, it should come out of our fund balance rather than this separate capital infrastructure that we're sort of moving off. We really felt this really did fit here.
So I want to say that I think this is awesome because I've heard over years and years and years about the fund balance, the fund balance, the fund balance. One, I'm happy to see that it's being used and reinvested in our buildings and in our students. And two, I'm happy to see it broken down so that we can share that. When we're talking about the literacy program, is that something similar to like Eureka Math on the math side? So every single person would have, no matter if I was at Ranger or Percasset, everybody would have the same plan?
Good analogy.
And then I also had a question, ride reimbursement came up. I know that we've done a lot of construction and things over with the roofs. When we get reimbursement from RIDE, does that go back to you as the school department, or does that go
Goes
back to
back
the
to the
town
general
general
fund.
fund?
Goes
So
back
it's
to the
not
general
money that you can access for any future uses, it goes back to the town?
Not directly, certainly, I guess, if you see fit to fund our, our request, but no, we cannot.
And
It
the
goes back
reason
to the general
behind
fund.
My question is, so you're using some of your fund balance for part of like the ceiling tiles and things like
Yep.
that, which was part of a plan from RIDE,
Right.
that there is some reimbursement?
And the theory behind that is the town owns the buildings. You know, those are town-owned buildings where, you know, yes, we use them, but those are town-owned buildings. So RIDE felt very strongly that, you know, that you in the state, that those funds should really come back to the general fund of the town, not restricted to schools.
That is the only real way you can actually reallocate that money back to the town.
Is-
You couldn't even do it by an FTR. You can only do it by getting it reimbursed through the capital through the capital plan, and then it comes back to the town.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your answers.
If you have anything else, just let us know. If you have anything else for our finance subcommittee, please feel free to reach out to us as well.
Thank you so much, Deb.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you for your time. We will probably be communicating with you for another
Yep.
time for you to come in. And that
Okay.
was a great offer on your part. Thank you so much.
We look forward to it.
All this information. Thank you again very much.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the school committee. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, guys.
So Budget Committee, we're going to move on to item number 12. Oh, yeah, I'm going to. We're going to schedule, do B first. The scheduling of the site visit, you have a document for this Saturday. Take a look at that. And just make sure that everyone's on board. If anyone knows they're coming, let me know now. Do you know if anybody's coming to the library?
Yep.
Going to the library first?
Yep.
We're going to the library
Yeah,
first?
and it's on the
Yeah.
site, the agenda. So, yeah.
Library first and then come back here to town hall.
At 9 a.m. and
No food allowed inside the library, sorry. No what? No food.
no donuts and coffee then.
So-
No
won't be
donuts and
donuts.
coffee at the library, sorry.
On the parking lot.
So who knows they're going to be going into the library? Okay, there's plenty of people then, that's great, okay. And who knows they're coming to town hall?
That's after the library?
Right,
Yeah.
right after, yes. Just right after, we'll probably all leave together. It's enough people though. So that's, B. Item A, I believe we're going to have to wait for Jeff, because I think he has the information. I think he was going to email it to me, and didn't quite get there. But yeah, I think that will come out of the agenda, and if you have any input, just.
Yeah, because one of the things is we did it 2 years ago, but I don't think we did it last year, was the audit. Is the auditor was here, but I think more helpful was someone from the town council or Denise, the treasurer, in terms of going. So where we ended up at 9/30 to 2018, where we stood, where the fund balance stood. There's a bunch of different things in there that helpful. Last year, it got into some of the audit of the school, and we didn't even go over the document. So
That's what
I think
was
that would be
thinking,
helpful.
audit is
So I'll
helpful.
communicate that to Jeff, and he'll request somebody.
Great.
That's great. Thanks, Brendan. Okay, so I think we've covered all the items. Does anyone have any final comments? We're early, so,
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second?
and all those in favor?
Aye.